Hello, hello, and welcome to Istanbul, Turkey. I'm Toby, and this is Nomadic and Travels, and today I'm going to give you a video about why you might want to come to Istanbul. Should you come now? What would be the pros and cons of coming now, 2022? And I'm also going to let you know a lot of the logistics about how to get around, how to get from the airport, all the little maybe nuisances and annoyances that you want to get out of the way if you decide that you're going to come to Istanbul. Now, remember that my travel channel, YouTube channel, My Hour, is basically geared towards, it's basically about my lifestyle and my friend Israel's lifestyle too. It's about traveling for longer periods of time generally and living as a digital nomad. So I'm going to be a whole month in Istanbul, but this particular video is going to be able to apply to anyone coming to Istanbul. So basically my channel is hopefully appealing to three different audiences. The first being digital nomads and expats, people that are from usually a Western country, but really any country, and that are moving to another country because they want to experience that country, they want to live and work from there, or maybe they're retired and they want to experience a lower cost and a higher quality of life in those areas which are important to them. That's the first target audience. The second is people that just want to be inspired by that kind of a lifestyle. Maybe they're never going to do it, but they're interested to watch. There's a couple called Tangerine Travels that I watch, and they just live and travel all around Mexico. I particularly want to spend part of my time in different places, not just one country, but I still enjoy watching them. I think they're interesting, and I think the idea is inspiring. So that's another part of the audience. And the third part of the audience is, because I get so deep into these, sometimes I'm in a lot of these destinations for a whole month, and I'm able to get information that people that are only there for 2 or 3 days aren't able to get. And I can pass that information along to you, and it can apply to and give value to even your shorter stays. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk about why you might want to come to Istanbul, why you might not want to come right now depending on your priorities, and the logistics. This is still on the border between a developing and developed country, so there are some logistics here that you won't run into in other places. So, welcome to Istanbul. Israel actually scooted off to Mexico, and hopefully I'm going to join up with him there a little bit later, but I'm here by myself, except for my German friend who's coming for a little bit, but whose also name is Toby, believe it or not. But I'm here by myself for a month, so I've already been here for a little bit, so I'm really gonna give you some lowdown that's gonna be very valuable to you. So let's get started. One of the reasons to come to Istanbul is the food. The food is great. It's an international cuisine because Istanbul is the crossroads, and always has been, even when it was called Constantinople, it was the crossroads of East and West. So the cuisine is really good. It's a little similar to Greek. Turkish would probably say the Greeks took it from them, and then there's the whole vice versa thing, but lots of different restaurant options.
This is quite delightful, and it's only a couple dollars each thing. This is apparently Swiss chard with pomegranate seeds. And this is a big dollop of yogurt. It tastes more like sour cream to me. Bread, which I didn't ask for, but they said it's free. And whatever they put in this olive oil is heavenly. Better than anything I've had in Toledo. And the Toledo olive oil is pretty damn good. And then this is fried goat cheese.
And one of the things that I'm enjoying right now is pomegranates are very affordable here. They call it nar. So you can get nar that's already ready to go and ready to eat. I got this for this whole bowl worth for $1.50. And you can also get hand-pressed pomegranate juice in a hand press for basically $1. To me, that's one of the greatest things so far about Istanbul. If you have any idea how much pomegranate juice is in the United States, you know how amazing that is. Why do you want to come to Istanbul? Well, crossroads of the world, one of them. One of the most important cities in world history, and especially Western history, because it was basically the capital of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine half, for about 1,000 years. It was the capital of the Ottoman Empire for about 500 years. It was a thriving secular country for about 80 years, starting with Ataturk, and now it's kind of a mix. The current government wants it to be a little bit more Islamic, so that's on the increase. things are changing a little bit in that regard, but who knows what's going to happen in the future. So one of the reasons you might want to come to Istanbul is it is a diverse place. There's people from all over. Some people would say that it's in the Middle East, but it's probably if so, it would be considered one of the most open places in the Middle East, and it's one of the most open countries in the Muslim world. You will see some women with their heads covered here in Istanbul, but you'll see a ton of women that don't have their heads covered. So it's very much a mix. There's people from all over. The Turkish people, I have found 9 times out of 10 to be one of the most friendly people I've encountered. So I love that. They're very welcoming. They have a hospitable spirit.
Hey, how are you?
They're open to foreigners, they're open to Americans, they're open to other people that I've met from other countries. So I found them to be very warm and welcoming. So the people is a reason to come, the food is a reason to come, the international and diverse aspect is a reason to come. Now let's talk about the other reasons, which are the beauty and the history. This city has so much history, and so much of it is easily accessible. Basically, the city you can kind of divide up into 3 parts. There's 2 parts on the European side, because this is the biggest city in Europe, right? It's a huge city, massive city. 2 parts of it are on the European side, 1 part of it is on the Asian side. On the Asian side, it's like a cool hip neighborhood, starting with, it's called Kadıköy, I believe. There's 2 parts of the European side. One of them has all the historical stuff, basically, and it's the part that has the Hagia Sophia, it's the part that has the Dolmabace Palace, and it has Sultanahmet, which is that neighborhood with the Grand Bazaar. All the historical stuff is there and has been there because that's where the original city was, even in Byzantine times and through the times when it was part of the Muslim Ottoman Empire. The other European side is just across that Golden Horn part of the water, and that's where there's the Galata Tower, which was actually a Genoese Italian tower. So foreigners lived over there even in the older times. So both of those European sides are rich in history, tons of stuff to do. So yeah, in general, if you want a historical splurge in Istanbul, you can't really go wrong. It's one of the greatest cities for that. Now, having said that, I have some reasons why, if this is the only time you're ever going to be able to come to Istanbul, right now might actually not be the time you want to come, depending on the reason that you're coming. And here's why. Several things are basically closed or altered. So, the number one thing to see in Istanbul is the Hagia Sophia, and that has been changed. It used to be a museum, and now it's a full-time mosque. So that comes with it some pros and cons. So, Hagia Sophia is one of the most important architectural monuments, places, spaces in the history of the world, especially in the history of Western art and religion. And for most of the last, I think, probably 80, 90 years, it was a museum. It was originally built as a church and was basically this stunning piece of work, a stunning piece of art that had never existed before in the history of churches when it was built maybe 1,500 years ago, I think the 5th or 6th century, under the emperors. I think the first version was started by Constantine, and then Justinian built the grand one. You can go more into the history with someone else, but the point being, it's one of the most beautiful churches in the world. Now, about 1,000 years later, it was taken over and converted into a mosque. And then about 500 years later, when the Ottoman Empire fell apart and Turkey became a more secular country, a more open country, they decided to make it into a museum so that people could come and enjoy its heritage as both one of the greatest churches and basilicas, but also as a mosque, which it had been. So you could come and you could see aspects of both. You could see all the ancient mosaics from the Byzantine times, and you could also see a lot of the writing and I don't want to say scriptures, but whatever the word is for the Islamic writing, and because they don't put up images in mosques. It's mainly the scripts. You could still see all that. You could see both.
This place is really beautiful, and it's still really worth coming to, even though part of it, from a museum perspective and a Byzantine perspective, is diminished because of its reconversion into a mosque. It's still really wonderful to see, and you must see it if you come to Istanbul, but I'm not gonna lie, it smells like smelly feet. Right now I'm in the ladies section of the Hagia Sophia, and the only reason I'm allowed over here is because it's not during prayer time. But it's really off to the side. The men really get the best view behind these kind of curtains.
Two other things which are basically almost complete closures. The Basilica Cistern, which is a cistern, like where they would store the water in the times of Byzantine Rome, is completely closed. And we don't know when it's going to be open again. It's one of the greatest things to see in Istanbul, and it's one of the top things any tourist guide will tell you. You can't see it right now. So if this is the only time you're ever going to be able to come to Istanbul and you're thinking, should I come now or should I wait and see if some of these things are open? Think about that. The Blue Mosque. So the Blue Mosque was basically built next to the Hagia Sophia to be better than the Hagia Sophia, which is very difficult to do, but arguably they achieved that. They had more technology at the time because it was a little bit later. But the Blue Mosque is stunning. It's wonderful. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful from the outside. You can see it from the outside. But it's even more beautiful from the inside. But guess what? You can't see it from the inside right now. Pretty much closed. Is it completely closed? No. You can still stand in a really long line and walk into the Blue Mosque and see a bunch of construction and a tiny little piece of the beautiful dome. You can't get any idea of what it's like to really visit the Blue Mosque. So screw that, right? So you can't see the Basilica Cistern right now. You can't see the Blue Mosque right now. We don't have an official date for when either of those are going to be either finished with construction or reopened, because like I said, Basilica Cistern completely closed. Blue Mosque might as well be closed because you can't see anything. You can still see the Galata Tower, which is cool. Takes you about an hour. Topkapi Palace is still open. Definitely you want to see Topkapi Palace and the Harem. So Dolmabace Palace is also open. So there are still some things to see, but some of the top sites in Istanbul, basically, not the right time. So now let me talk about what will probably, unfortunately, get me some haters. But I really hope not, because I mean this with the best spirit of information. Right now, the government in Istanbul is very controversial. There are many people in Turkey that like it, and there are many people that do not. I can't get into it too much on here because it's not meant to be a political channel, and also you're not really supposed to criticize much in Istanbul. There have been problems with people that tried to do that, even on social media. So I'm just going to try to give you as much information as I can. Basically, last year in July of 2020, they decided that they didn't want the Hagia Sophia to be a museum anymore. It was a World Heritage Site. It was operated by UNESCO. They decided, basically the president and the government of Turkey, they want it to be an active 24/7 mosque. So people were like, oh, but how can tourists still go see it and enjoy it? You still can. So they basically tried to, they converted it into a full-time mosque, but said, don't worry, you're still going to be able to see everything. Well, it's not actually the case. So here are the cons right now of the Hagia Sophia. You can go to the Hagia Sophia, and when it was a museum you had to pay. Now you don't have to pay. But a lot of the great mosaics are covered. So here's the catch. It took me so long to figure this out, and a lot of research, so you're getting a lot of value and a lot of footwork here, because this isn't available even online, even on their official website. It's very obscure and it's very confusing. The truth is, there are several historical, amazing pieces of art which are mosaics inside the Hagia Sophia, or Hagia Sophia, depending on how you pronounce it. There's basically two great ones that you can still see when it's not prayer time. And then there are others that you can't see at all.
These are the mosaics that used to be visible in the Hagia Sophia.
The two that are covered only during prayer time, I'll show you, they have little curtains that go up and down. And you're going to want to look up prayer times online, and then keep in mind that they usually last about 15 minutes or so, I was told.
Okay, so this one you can see, just not during prayer time. And this is at the entrance. You see they had that big curtain contraption up there that they'll pull down for prayer time. Now it is a little tricky to figure out when prayer time is, but They usually post the prayer times online at the exact prayer time, but I'm just not sure if that curtain is down a little bit before or a ways after. But if you go nowhere near those prayer times, you should be good. Okay, now here in front of the entrance to the men's section, we do have the ability to see one of the beautiful Jesus mosaics. There is a curtain that they will pull up during prayer, but if you notice, unfortunately, even the contraption that they use to pull up the curtain partially obscures the mosaic and kind of takes away from the experience. But they're pretty thin wires, so you can still see it pretty good. I don't know if you could see it. You could see it better in real life, but there's a lot of wires in front of Jesus.
The best mosaic you still can never see, regardless of whether it's prayer time or not. It's one of the Virgin Mary mosaics, and they have it covered by sheets, and the ones around her are also covered by sheets, and those are never removed. Those sheets never open or close. You cannot see those mosaics anymore. They are obscured. So I prefer that it would have been kept a museum, not because I don't think that Muslims should be able to go there and use it for prayer. I think that would have been an interesting compromise. But if certain aspects of its historical character are going to be completely obscured and never available to be seen by the world at large, even though it's a World Heritage Site, I think it was better when it was a museum, because then it can represent the shared history. You can go and view it as it was as a church and as a mosque. So it doesn't matter which religion you are, you could still gain something from it. There's a lot of places where Muslims can go and pray anytime, even the Blue Mosque, which is right next door. But however, it depends on your perspective. So I want to be fair to people that might not think the same way as I do. If you're a practicing Muslim and you really wanted to be able to pray in this historical place that would have been prayed in by Ottoman Muslims and Muslims from around the world for 500 years, you can now do so. And you couldn't do that when it was just a museum. I mean, you could go in there and pray, but you couldn't pray in the style that Muslims are traditionally supposed to pray, which includes the way you do it and the way you face, because it would have been too difficult with all the tourists and things in there. So, hopefully, it really shouldn't be controversial what I'm saying about this, because it's really just giving information, a little bit of opinion, but mostly information. I really want you to be able to weigh the pros and cons. So if you're a Muslim and you want to go in there and pray, this is the best time for you, because you can go 24/7 to the Hagia Sophia, and you can pray during prayer times, and you could probably pray in there anytime. I actually saw people praying in there during non-prayer times, 24/7, and it's in one of the most beautiful historical buildings in the world. Here I am standing at the entrance to the Bosphorus Strait at the magnificent Dolmabace Palace in Istanbul, Turkey. So I just went inside this palace. It's really magnificent, very vast, very huge. Definitely a must-see here in Istanbul, and it rivals the palaces all over Europe, I would say. It's not as old as something like Versailles. This palace was actually built in the 1800s, and it's very, very European style. It's a big departure from the other sites that you'll see here in Istanbul, because those are very, very old. The Topkapi Palace, much, much older, from earlier Ottoman times, and of course the Hagia Sophia, it is much older than that, and any of the remains from when this was Constantinople. But definitely, I would say it is worth it to come to the Dolmabace Palace if you want to get an idea of the 1800s imperial life, how the sultans would have lived, and then Ataturk also lived here and died here, and you can see his burial chamber. The highlights are basically just the beauty inside, the chandeliers, the space, the open domes. You're actually not allowed to take photos inside or videos, which is very strange. Do keep that in mind. But there were some people that I found some footage of people that snuck photos, so I'll post some of that for you. Definitely worth a visit. I would say that some of the other interesting points inside, things that you wouldn't see anywhere else. For example, they have a beautiful circumcision room. They do circumcision not at infancy here, in my understanding, but it's a ceremony a little bit later. So it's a beautiful room, beautiful bed for it. It's quite the big deal. Probably not a room I would have wanted in my house, but
it's a tradition here, and it's an interesting thing to see something from a different culture, right? Also, so there's a main palace, which is spectacular, and then there's the harem, which basically, you can do some research, there's great documentaries about it. It's not exactly as the stereotype is that we think, but it's where the wife and all the concubines, basically sex slaves, right, would have lived. I found it very interesting. Obviously, to me, the most stark, interesting thing, not obviously, but is the fact of how grand and splendid and magnificent the Sultan's quarters are, but his wife's are like kind of shabby in comparison, and the harem is much darker, the ceilings are lower. It's just not the life that you would have as a woman of court would have been nothing like the life you would have had as the man, and that's also pretty fascinating to see that stark separation, that they wouldn't live together necessarily in the same place. There would be a passageway connecting them, and the genders would have been kept separate. So you can witness some of that here too, even though this is later than most sites you'll see in Ottoman Istanbul. This is the 1800s, like I said. A couple of nuisances that you might want to keep in mind, like I mentioned before, you're not allowed to take any photos or any video inside, which is a very strange rule. I don't really know the justification for that. Nobody really had an answer to it. I can only kind of guess they don't want flash photography for preservation of some of the art, but I've just never been to a tourist site that doesn't allow pictures inside of any kind. So I thought that was kind of strange and kind of anti-tourist. Maybe they should change that policy, because what ends up happening is it's just a bunch of guards shouting at a bunch of tourists to not take pictures and videos, and then everyone's trying to sneak them anyway. So it becomes this kind of cat and mouse game that's actually kind of interesting and fun to watch. It's very strange. Just like in a lot of Istanbul, the English proficiency is not as high as in other parts of Europe. So if you have any question of any type of level of complexity, you're going to need to whip out your Google Translate. And another thing to really note, there's not very many postings about the history or details about anything that you're going to see. So if you want to know what you're looking at, you're going to want to either get the audio guide or have your own guide, or do some reading ahead of time, because even the written stuff that they do have is actually not, it's really not in proper English. It's probably in wonderful Turkish, and then it looks like almost like they Google translated it into English, so it's only about 90% correct. It's really awkward to read, and it's not a great experience. The audio guides are probably better, but one thing to remember about the audio guides, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get one because I don't carry my passport with me when I'm out walking around on the street, because it's too easy to get it stolen, especially in countries that have a little bit of a higher rate of pickpocketing and stuff. So because I didn't have my passport with me, I wasn't able to get the audio guide. You can either have your passport, or you can have $100 in cash or 100 euros. And obviously for safety reasons, I don't carry either on my person. So if you're ever following me or tracking me around, you're only gonna get like $5 in cash. I use my credit card. Anyway, so keep that in mind. If you do want the audio guide, make sure you bring $100 cash or 100 euros or your passport. Maybe your driver's license might work. So that's just a little tip to improve your experience here. This is probably my last tourist stop in Istanbul. I've had a really nice time. I really recommend Dolmabace Palace. Even with those kind of nuisances, it's definitely worth seeing. It really is a magnificent palace. It's better than I thought. Give yourself a lot of time. It's huge. It's massive. I came on a day with hardly any tourists in the middle of the week in the winter. I bet you it's really crowded any other season, so just give yourself a lot of time if you want to take in this palace. See you next time, okay? And if you enjoyed this, feel free to subscribe and click the bell to get notifications when there's new fantastic videos.